All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Johnson from Student Affairs. Thrilled that you are joining us today for our first mental health seminar of 2023. This is a series that I hope many of you know that we launched a couple of years ago now with the kickoff of our Mental Health Summit. And we are thrilled that the response from the community has been such that we are able to keep them going and offer such robust opportunities for dialogue about all manner of things related to our community's mental health and well-being. So just a couple of housekeeping notes before I introduce our guest facilitator for the day. So students, thank you for popping up the screen. We will have the ability to get course credit, CLE credit for your participation in the session today. We will show that QR code at the very end, so hang with us and keep me honest. I have in my notes here to remember to do that, but please know that that will be available to you. We encourage everyone to participate in a great dialogue today. There will be a presentation led by our facilitator, and then we will have an opportunity for Q&A. And sometimes the facilitators and Dr. David Obergfell will let us know whether or not he's cool with this as we go through the session, but sometimes there's an opportunity for questions even before we get to the Q&A if somebody has a burning item that relates to something that he's talking about in the moment. We do have two options available for participation today. The chat function is enabled, and we will have Q&A. I would recommend and encourage the Q&A as a primary resource for the question and answer section in particular, because it helps us keep track of those questions and indicate whether or not they've been responded to or whether or not they will be responded to next, that kind of thing. So I encourage you to use that as your primary resource. So with that, let's just get started. We have a session today that is titled How to Foster Happiness, Cultivating Emotional Language and Pursuing Value-Based Actions. Happiness is a powerful, incredible feeling, but we also know that it remains elusive to many of us, sometimes just periodically and sometimes longer term. In our seminar today, we plan to delve into developing a better understanding about the nature of happiness through recognizing and honoring and attending to our emotional states. We're going to explore how to identify our values and then interconnect those values to our actions with a goal to promote well-being and happiness. Today, we're very pleased to have with us our colleague, Dr. David Obergfell, to facilitate the session. David is our new Executive Director of our Student Wellbeing and Violence Prevention team, which oversees the departments of Violence Prevention and Advocacy Services, Student Wellness, and Campus Recreation, to take a holistic view to wellness, violence prevention, and of course, student success. In his role as Senior Prevention Strategy Officer, which is a part of his job, he serves as our key leader and collaborator on interpersonal and gender-based violence prevention, who will guide the development of a cross-campus violence prevention strategy, including sexual assault and harassment, dating and domestic violence, and stalking as well. Prior to coming to Carolina, David served on an extended active duty assignment as Suicide Prevention and Interpersonal Violence Subject Matter with the Air Force Headquarters Integrated Resilience Directorate. Previously, he was the Senior Director for Crisis Services at Terrace Health, which is a federally qualified healthcare center in Arizona. He holds a Doctor of Social Work from the University of Southern California and master's degrees in social work from Arizona State University and in forensic psychology from Argosy University. David, thanks again so much for being with us today and leading us in this conversation. The Zoom room is all yours.
Amy, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and welcome everybody. I'm going to start with just a statement. I hope everybody today is experiencing joy. And I'm not going to necessarily use the word happiness because we'll use it a lot during the presentation, but right now in this moment, I hope you're experiencing some joy, or you felt joy sometime today or sometime later today into the evening and the night, you feel and experience joy. Joy and happiness tend to be linked. There's subtle connections between how joy is experienced, and we tend to chase happiness, but we don't always chase joy. So I do hope that everybody has a joyful day, but also a complex, interesting, and engaging day. I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive into this, the presentation. And thank you for the hearts and the thumbs up too, wonderful. Here we go. All right. And just a verification, Is everybody able to see the PowerPoint on the screen okay?
It looks great.
Thumbs up, wonderful. So we're going to have this as a PowerPoint today. I'll speak quite a bit, but to Amy's point earlier, she said, can we ask questions on the way? Yes, absolutely. Ask questions, pause me anytime along the way, because this is meant to be a conversation for all of us together. And if there's something that is a point of interest and you're curious about something, or there's something I define in a way that I could redefine or clarify or change, by all means, pause me along the way. This is our guide. The conversation is the important piece. I get the good fortune and I'm lucky to be able to talk with you for an hour or so, but by all means, I want to hear more from you. And it's that strange place of I get to talk a lot and I hope feedback comes my way. So we're going to talk about how to foster happiness, cultivating emotional language and pursuing value-based actions. Cultivating being the key word, that we have to work towards things that cultivate a life, relationships and experiences where happiness can flourish. And that tends to be a lot of intentional hard work. That which we really dive into in higher education systems and social systems of care, we understand the nature of this work has a lot to do with how we understand ourselves, how we learn about ourselves, and really get to know ourselves better and reflect that in our relationships. Let me advance this, maybe. There we go. So questions to start us off today. Are you happy? I want you to pause there for a moment and think to yourself, am I happy? Am I always happy? When am I happy? What are the things that make me happy? How do I know when I'm happy? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What is happening when I'm happy? Or do I not necessarily recognize it and only just experience it, which is okay too. I experience happiness, but I haven't necessarily put thought towards what are the elements that combine to make me happy? What are the things that I do in my life in the pursuit of happiness? We often do this. We ask that big question, are you happy? And we see this, yes, keep doing whatever you're doing. Don't change anything because you're happy. No. Do you want to be happy? Yes, then change something. Or do you want to be happy? No, keep doing whatever you're doing. We have kind of this binary thought about what happiness is supposed to be in our life, which is either we are happy or we're not. But we don't necessarily consider all the things that lead to happiness existing as kind of an end result of the quality of our life. This one's too easy. It tends to look more like this. Happiness is complex. Contentment, joy, fulfillment, meaning, engagement, all these things are really complex aspects that lead to happiness. But if we're only chasing happiness, we tend to run around in circles and it gets really complex and confusing. And oftentimes we're let down because we don't find that happiness that we're looking for. And we live in a culture that really promotes this state of happiness, that either we're pursuing happiness or something is wrong. And I'd like to introduce today that that is not necessarily the only choice that we have. The only understanding of happiness isn't that we are either happy or we're not doing what we should be doing, that we're not fulfilling our obligation to ourselves to be happy, but that we can understand it in a different way. Are you present in your interactions every day? Or are you distracted? Are you present in what's happening in the moment in front of you? Are you aware of your connections and your relationships? And when I say connections, I mean the connection to one, yourself. Do I have a good understanding and solid relationship with myself? And do I also understand how I change over time? And I also change based on circumstances throughout the day. That I don't only have a choice of one emotion, which is happiness or the lack thereof, but I can experience a full range of emotions, identify what they mean, and that leads me to a better connection with myself, in addition to strong connections, deep connections with other people. So the different understanding may not be, am I happy? It can often be, am I connected? And to what am I connected to and how? So let's try something. In the pursuit of happiness, we also have to attend to awareness, attend to the moment and how we're doing right now. Before I dive into this, because I'm going to walk everybody through a little bit of a guided meditation. That will be the therapist in me. And at the same time, I think mindfulness practices, well, actually, I know mindfulness practices from an evidence-based standpoint work so well to ground us with ourselves. So we'll do this for a moment. Before that, I want to see if there's any questions or chats that came up already. Let me see here. I appreciate the anonymous attendee said, is it really a pursuit? Agreed. The challenge on happiness and the pursuit of happiness is, we're actually going to talk about that unreachable horizon, if you will. And if we're always pursuing the unreachable horizon, we're not necessarily looking around to our right, to our left, or experiencing what's happening here, because we can never really reach the horizon. And that's actually a really good lead into this. So let's try this together. I'd like everybody who's with us on this presentation to first get comfortable. Take a really good deep breath. Nice and slow. No need to force or pressure it. Just take a good deep breath. And if you're sitting, make sure you're sitting in a comfortable position. Maybe your hands or your legs aren't crossed. And as you breathe, again, nice and slow, feel free to close your eyes. And if you choose not to, perfectly okay. Find a comfortable place for your gaze to land. And for the next few breaths, as you continue to breathe, bring your full focus of attention just to your breathing. Notice the feeling of air flowing in through your nostrils or your mouth, down into your lungs. And even down into your belly. If you breathe deep, you should feel your belly move as well. Notice your inhale and your exhale. And just notice your breathing. Too often we spend time not noticing our physical state and how we can have influence over that simply by breathing and noticing how we are engaging with our breath. Feel what it feels like to release the air from your lungs and take another gentle breath in. Allow your mind time to drift to any thoughts it needs to. And I also want you to imagine that you're sitting by the side of a gently flowing stream. This might be a stream that you know, or it might be something you create in your mind using your imagination. You decide. There might be a light breeze blowing as you sit there. Sitting here dappled in light glistening off the water, or a soft green grass beneath you, or a comfortable smooth rock. Imagine the stream however you like. What it might smell like or sound like. And take a few seconds there. Now imagine there are leaves floating on the surface of the stream. And these leaves are gently flowing past you, down the stream. For the next minute, imagine that there are the leaves floating down the stream. You can see them moving. And see if you can take every thought that pops into your head and imagine yourself placing that thought on the leaf, on any one leaf that's passing you by. Do this regardless of whether the thoughts are positive or enjoyable, or negative or challenging. Simply place each thought on a leaf and let it float by and away from you. If you notice that your thoughts stop momentarily, just continue to watch the stream. Sooner or later, your thoughts will start up again, and then place each one gently on a leaf and allow it to float by. Allow the stream to flow at its own rate. There's no need to try and speed it up. The aim here is not to wash all the leaves away. The aim is to allow them to come and go in their own time. Just to sit and watch your thoughts and the leaves come and go as they will. If your mind says something along the lines of, oh, I can't do it, or this is stupid, this is a waste of my time, take those thoughts as well and place them on leaves and let them float by. If a leaf gets stuck, let it hang around. There's no need to force it to float away. Simply sit and watch, as sooner or later another leaf will come along and give it the nudge that it needs. If a difficult feeling arises, such as boredom or impatience or anxiety, simply acknowledge it. Say to yourself, here is the feeling of boredom. Here's the feeling of impatience. Here is a feeling of anxiety. And place those words on a leaf. Now, from time to time, your thoughts will hook you and you will lose track of this exercise. This is normal as our attention naturally wanders, and it will happen time and again. When you realize this and recognize that it's happened, simply come back to your stream. Continue to place each thought that pops into your mind on a leaf and watch it slip by. Again and again, your thoughts may hook you. Remember, this is normal. As soon as you notice this, you can always return to your stream. And now, as our exercise comes to an end, remember, this is your stream. This is a place you can return to anytime that you need. A place where you can invest and build your stream and leaves that carry your thoughts for you. As we end, begin to let go of your imagined stream and bring your attention back to where you are. Notice what you can hear, what you can feel. And when you're ready, open your eyes and notice what you can see directly around you. Take a few seconds to sit quietly, breathe in gently, and then we'll carry on with our discussion. But hold on to this sense of presence and spaciousness and the ability to let thoughts come and go without having to attend to every one. All right. So again, take a gentle breath. And if anybody would like to share any unique experiences going through that guided imagery, that guided mindfulness exercise, any thoughts that pop up in the chat? And if I see none, I assume everybody is well on the way to sleep, which is not a bad thing. Our lives are so full of energy, attention demands, and things that we need to attend to that oftentimes a guided imagery and a guided mindfulness exercise will move us towards the state of relaxation. These are ubiquitous now. They're everywhere. We have mindfulness exercises and imagery exercises that we can find in a whole lot of spaces in our lives. And I would encourage you to start building a mindfulness practice. And these are ways to do it because they're structured. You don't always have to do a guided meditation. It's a good way into structure how we think about things. Let's see, we got a few chats and some questions. Excellent. Finding peace is a rare thing. Wonderful validations, absolutely. We find peace, we find calmness, we can do things and build it into our day, but we have to be intentional about it. Thank you for the comments and the questions. So let's talk about happiness. As we moved ourselves into a mindful space, now we can be in a place where we can discuss happiness and also understand how to perceive it differently and cultivate emotional language, mindfulness practices, and value-based actions and meanings that build happiness for us without necessarily needing to pursue happiness in and of itself. So what is happiness? The UC Berkeley, the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley is really an amazing center. They've got a wonderful newsletter that you can sign up for. So if you go to greatergood.berkeley.edu, there's amazing tips that are scientifically based around cultivating happiness, well-being, and mindfulness towards the greater good. And it creates kindness in the world that really is has a great depth of understanding. So I encourage those who want to go check that out. But also looking at the Science Center, defining happiness formally is tricky. We should just know when we feel it, and yet that's often not the case. We tend to transpose happiness onto these other terms, such as amusement, joy, pride, or contentment. And when we think about the science of happiness, we often want to understand cause and effect. For most of us, the term happiness is interchangeable with subjective well-being. I feel well, I am well, I'm safe and secure, my needs are met, therefore, I'm happy. And I'll offer this, that well-being, yes, is a great measurement of security, safety, contentment, but it's not always happiness. Sometimes it is the sense of peace, but also challenges that are facing us and that we're able to engage those challenges that come out of well-being. But we ask people to evaluate their state of happiness often. And how often do we have folks that tell us, I just want you to be happy, or I hope that you're happy, or it sounds like you're happy. We use this language often. How often do we say, I hope that you're well? And what does that mean? And what work does it take to be well, as opposed to the passive aspect of just becoming happy? We ask a lot of questions around emotion, either they're positive or negative. How much of those do we feel on a daily basis? That's our affect. How do we feel right now? And then we also want to understand sense of purpose, meaning and purpose. Eudaimonia is the term around this, which really goes towards I'm living engaged in a meaningful, purpose-driven exercise or life. That's really important towards understanding where happiness can kind of come from, as opposed to just pursuing happiness. If I pursue things that are meaning-based and value-based, that I relate to, that are important to me, then happiness becomes a natural byproduct of that, a natural end result of that, a natural thing that happens because I'm pursuing meaning. So the science of happiness. It's imperfect, and it's also risky if our only goal is happiness. It's good to measure happiness as an indicator for, say, population health. How is an entire population doing from a well-being standpoint? Or it's effective for intentional self-help or counseling if we're really diving into understanding myself well and needing to measure how happy was I on Tuesday and how happy was I on Friday and what was maybe accounting for the difference. I think that's important, but oftentimes we tend to measure happiness only as the goal of achieving it. A different way is cultivating habits that serve well-being. And happiness is a dynamic and often present aspect, but not the end goal. So if I cultivate well-being, then I can expect happiness, but it's not an expectation that will lead me to disappointment if it's not there, because I can do more of my cultivation of well-being, of habits, of thinking about how to be well. And this oftentimes comes from a place of expectations and pressure. A lot of times this is culturally bound, relationship bound, communication bound, or even our self-perception of ourselves. How do we think about ourselves? It's bound in expectations and pressure. And oftentimes we feel, especially in higher education institutions, an enormous amount of pressure to succeed, to achieve at a level that will bring me security, and therefore I will be happy. And there's a lot of pressure to do that. But on a daily basis, trying to be happy all the time can be pretty exhausting. Because if we're trying to be happy, then we're maybe not attending to the things that create wellness. We're not attending to relationships because we're busy trying to be happy. And if I'm trying to be happy, I am centered solely on myself, but not necessarily the things or the events or the connections in my life that create meaning for me. So if the perception is only a constant state of happiness, then we will likely be constantly disappointed because happiness is not constant. It comes and goes based on what we're doing. And I will say this, if we think about happiness, part of being happy is also the ability to recognize and be sad, disappointed, sorrowful, to experience grief, to experience change or ambivalence or anxiety, to experience depression, and then to achieve the recognition of the emotion and how to engage in things that create wellness. Happiness doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in context of emotional recognition that can come from how we live towards our values. So a question for everybody on this presentation today: where in our lives is this pursuit of happiness, let's say again, pursuit of happiness reinforced? Where do you hear this on a daily basis? So throw some chats out there. Do you hear this from other folks, or do other folks expect you to be happy? Do you ever hear that? Family members? Yeah. My parents were notorious for this. I just want you to be happy. Great. What does that mean? Coaches, absolutely. Friends and family. This is natural, and oftentimes they don't want to hear I'm not happy. Thank you. Perfect. When we say I'm not happy, then there's the risk that folks feel like I'm going to burden somebody else with my emotion if it's not happy, which moves us against genuine connection. If the only thing we can be with each other is happy or joyous and only experience good things, then I would suggest that quality of the relationship is not necessarily deep, right? Good vibes only, absolutely. And if that's all we're allowed to be under pressure is happy or smiling or joyous and not expose a full range of emotions, then how do we become vulnerable in our relationships today? I want to talk to you more about other things that I feel besides happy, and also how can we be a support, a connection, a genuine relationship with each other beyond just the state of pursuing happiness, beyond just pursuing fun. Wonderful endeavors, but not the only parts of life. Reading some of these. Wonderful. WS, thank you. Pursued happiness from family members, for example, they would give me invalidating advice when I was battling depression. Happiness is a conscious choice. Yeah, when we are experiencing other emotions, oftentimes we have folks who will tell us, just be happy, which can translate to just get over it, and it's very invalidating. I will again suggest happiness, just like anger, are often secondary emotions. They're not the primary thing we can control, but we can control how we think about circumstances. We can control what we do in our life, and choices that we do make that create wellness, even though it can be a struggle, and then happiness can come out of that. But we can't just be happy, without a doubt. Thank you for sharing. So if we think about where it's reinforced, comment in the Q&A, thank you. The Q&A, Daisy DG says, I think I am my toughest critic and I expect myself to stay positive at all times. Sometimes I mistake my unhappiness or sadness for a lack of gratitude, and it makes me feel selfish. Daisy, thank you so much for saying that, because I think that's an experience many of us have, that I don't have the right to be anything but happy because I might burden other people. And yet we all have a full range of emotions that are informational. They serve a wonderful purpose, and the primary purpose emotions serve for us is the ability to connect with each other. Human beings are intrinsically social animals, social beings, social creatures. Use whatever term you like for that biological relationship, but also from a spiritual or meaningful standpoint, we are designed to interact and cooperate. And emotions are the information and the language of connection. We can talk academic, we can talk cognitive all day long, but emotions are the language of connection. And if we allow for that, then we absolutely are not selfish. We are sharing. And when we share our genuine self with somebody else from an emotional standpoint, then we are creating a deeper connection. So I'd like to say, do we expect, about happiness, do we expect to find it? Do we think we deserve it? Do we let it find us? Oftentimes we get the message in our lives that happiness should just be abundant. And it can be if we are cultivating meaning and emotionally based language in our life and understanding ourselves at the emotional level amongst a whole range of emotions, as opposed to just expecting to be happy all the time. If we do expect to be happy all the time, that's where we often will be disappointed. And then it becomes even more elusive. We're not happy because we feel like we're not achieving, or we're failing, or something in my life is going wrong because I'm supposed to be happy just like everybody else around me is. And it's a passive aspect of expecting happiness to happen, as opposed to the active process of cultivation. Do we cultivate our relationships, including with ourselves? Do we cultivate the choices that we make? What do we pay attention to? What do we intentionally not pay attention to? Do we cultivate intention? I intend to be a certain way, or intend to reach out to a certain person, or intend to do something today. I set my intentions in a way that lines up with my values. I intend to be kind to the person who's serving me coffee today, as opposed to being annoyed because the line is too long. I can set that intention, and that's an exercise, simply put, that cultivates happiness, because I'm setting my intention from a place of kindness, and then I'm choosing to act that way towards kindness instead of reacting to a situation that I don't feel like I have control over. So we choose and cultivate our intentions. We choose and cultivate our thinking, and our thinking about thinking. How many of us have ever thought and pondered, do I think about how I think? Do I recognize my emotions and experiences? This is kind of a cognitive behavioral therapy model, but our thoughts actually contribute to how we feel. How I think about a situation can influence my emotional response to it. And that emotional response moves towards an action. I do something with that emotion. I act on it. And then my action then reinforces or creates a new thought. Because I acted this way, something happened, and I think about it. So it's this model, and there's no one place where this starts. It can happen at any one of these areas: thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that can influence how we exist in the world and how we experience the world. That being said, if we pay attention to how we're thinking, we can influence our feelings. If we're paying attention to how we're feeling, we can influence our actions or choices. And if we pay attention to our choices, we can influence how we're thinking. So we have control here that can actually increase our quality of life and our quality of relationships. So to that end, for the pursuit of happiness, chasing that elusive state and the myth of arrival. How many of us have heard that my life will be good when, or how many of us have set goals that I will be fine when I hit that job, when I am making this much money, when I have this house, when I've achieved this degree, when I have done this amazing thing, then I will be happy. And an interesting study, I think this is UPenn, and actually there's some, I'm going to talk about UPenn and some of the science of value-based and meaning-based choices. But really looking at this myth of arrival is that we can never get to that horizon. If we're only pursuing the horizon, we're ignoring what's happening along the way. And true happiness actually comes from enjoying the journey. It may sound slightly cliche, but if you're going on an amazing road trip, half of the fun is the road trip itself, or the meaning that we create in bonding with other people is the journey, not necessarily the destination. So if our focus is only on the destination of the future and what we want, and then and only then we can be happy, we're missing the quality of our lives and the relationships along the way. And there's a big gap in life if that's all we do is work to end up happy, as opposed to allowing ourselves to cultivate well-being and events and meaning and value in our relationships. And then we can experience happiness all the time, regardless of the goals we have set. This in no way says don't set goals. But what we can also say is don't tether happiness solely to those goals, and I can't be happy otherwise. I put an asterisk by doing. So being, connecting, noticing, and doing. We're good at doing. We do a lot of things every day. But what we don't necessarily do from a cultural standpoint, or at least our high pressure lives don't always allow us, is to notice when we're being. I'm being in this moment right now. I'm sitting in the sun. I'm talking to a friend. I'm going for a run. I'm being. We don't always recognize when we're connecting. So noticing when we're being, connecting, and doing is important. And one of the longest running studies on happiness, the Harvard Study of Adult Development, this is really phenomenal, because if we had one way to actually measure happiness over the long run, there's one thing that really tends to work, and that's connections, relationships, social connections, and community versus isolation or disconnection. And oftentimes in our own pursuit of happiness and goals, we might impose a self, even unintended isolation upon ourselves, because we say, I'll have time for relationships later, or I'll have time to invest in the quality later. And then I miss those connection points and developing that skill set to foster happiness along the way. Folks who have really good quality and deeply rooted connections are healthier, happier, and live longer. And the threat to happiness is not always from others. Most of the time it's from us, our thoughts. We're doing things that aren't always aligned with our values. We're doing things that go against our fostering and cultivation of well-being and happiness. And when we think about relationships, it's not just the number of relationships that we might have. We could quantify it and say, well, I have so many friends, I should be happy. But I want to kind of put this here to you around even social media. Think towards quality relationships. So think social media use, right? We have a best life pressure. Best life is, what do we post about ourselves, and how do we shape the narrative of who we are on social media? And is that a genuine reflection of who you are, or is it these curated moments of what my life is looking like for everybody else? And what we end up in is this kind of best life competition. And what we see through social media oftentimes is that it's not just a mechanism to connect with each other. It's also a place where we find distress, because even though I think I'm doing okay, I see somebody else's curated post that seems like they're doing better than me. And then I feel pressure to compete or to do as well as, or even better than they are. And we start to lack or lose the quality of connections. So when we think about these feedback loops, that if my only validation and joy comes from maybe a social media because of what I curated, that I'm doing amazing things, we miss those points of, I'm also doing not well here, or I'm sad because of, or I'm having a hard day or a challenging time with this. If all we're chasing is likes, we get into a feedback loop that's the only place we believe our happiness can kind of come from. And then our relationships start to look only an allowing of happiness or competition. So be aware of that best life pressure. And we can intentionally choose how we engage in all of our relationships, including digital and social relationships online. Relationships are hard though, right? They're complicated. It takes hard work and lifelong cultivation, pruning and regrowing relationships. And it is always an interface and interaction. And chemistry is at play, right? Our facilitators. I'm going to pause here and check the chat. Okay, good. Just making sure I'm not missing any questions right now. If I miss questions, by all means, let me know and I'll circle back. So chemistry, our facilitators. The good news here is that even though we have neurotransmitters in our brain, for those of you who are diving into neuropsychology or neurochemistry, this is the moment I like to geek out just a little bit, but it's really serotonin and dopamine. These are our connectors, our love neurotransmitters, the things that build that feeling of awe, connection, joy, love, chemistry with somebody else. And we can control how they operate. And what this really means is that we're designed to interact. And it takes skill and practice, though, and the skill of understanding, naming, and especially not avoiding our own emotions. Not just tolerance, right? Okay, I'm sad, but then I'm going to ignore it and I'm going to be happy. That's a tolerance and avoidance state versus I'm sad and it's okay to feel sad and accept it as an intrinsic part of our life and our experience, and know that no emotional state is also permanent because it changes and emotions are dynamic and informative. Then we start to create empathy because we're recognizing this within ourselves, and we can start to use emotional language with other folks. I do want to make a note here that feelings and emotions are never dangerous. I work with a lot of folks over time that feel like having an emotion is dangerous, risky, or a failure on their part, and they avoid them because of that. An emotion in and of itself is never dangerous. A feeling is never dangerous. We choose and oftentimes move to act based on the emotions we're having. And what can be dangerous is we're avoiding the emotion and we act in a way that is risky because we're trying to avoid it. An example of this would be if I feel sad or depressed and I turn to alcohol or another substance to avoid that emotion, that can be risky. That's how it kind of works. But the feeling and emotion itself is never dangerous. Oftentimes it's the choices or actions we make associated with it that can be. So this practice of understanding ourselves equals empathetic capacity for others. That enables our quality relationships, and that's where we start to create meaning in our lives based on our relationships and shared goals, shared values. So connection. We do all three of these things, and I think oftentimes at any given day we can do these all together in various capacities. One of the risks, though, is that when we see if we're only doing one of the right or left, if we're only operating from a self-centered action standpoint, or only from a self-sacrificing action standpoint, then we're missing connection. So self-centered actions, they help me in the now. So how can other people help me get what I want? Self-centered action, I like to talk about traffic. So if there's traffic and there's a bunch of cars in front of you, how annoyed do you get with everybody else in front of you? And how often do we start to judge other people's driving skills? We start to assign beliefs or intentions to them, like that person is such a fill in the blank. And where did they learn how to drive, or don't they know that I have somewhere to be? Self-centered actions, right? So we're missing connection and we're building frustration. Self-centered actions oftentimes are based on the expectation that other people need to serve my need first. And that won't happen to the degree that we expect it will. And then we build frustration. And when we build frustration, we don't experience happiness or joy because we're in frustration. At the end of it, self-sacrificing actions, I help others, is a wonderful thing to do. But if we only help others and we neglect ourselves, then we lose the capacity to serve or help or support other people. And we also lose our capacity for longevity and connection, because now we're only serving someone else or another experience for the sake of serving, and that's where my identity becomes wrapped up. I'm only as good as my service. Either one of these extremes tends to be devoid of genuine connection. So connected action, meaning in relationships, helps both of us in the now and also creates stability and structure for the future. What do we agree on? Where are our boundaries? How do we talk about emotions? How do we support each other? How can I lean on you when I need you? How do you also lean on me when you need me? Connected action fosters relationships. So values mini identification. This is a real quick quiz for everybody. I want you to take a moment and write down or think to yourself, what are two things that are important to me? So take a moment, think of two things. We could do this with more with 5 things or 10 things, but right now for today, think of 2 things in your life, experiences, objects, could be anything, relationships that are important to you. And I can even say very important to you. I'll give everybody about 30 seconds to think on that. Okay. So by now you may have one or two things that identify it as being important or very important to you. Now, here's a way to check if you're in line with your values and how you operate every day, how you go through life on a day-to-day basis. How much time every day do I spend attending to those things? So think about those two things that you identified as being very important, and then answer the following for yourself. How much time every day do I spend attending to those things? And what we often see is under the pressure of life, the pressure to succeed, the pressure to quote unquote be happy without cultivating it, is that we ignore what's important to us because we're chasing something else. We're not living in accordance with our values, the things that are important to us. An example of this, I was working with a father who said that it was very important for him to be there for his children as he grew older. And this was a simple concept, but really hard to do. He was also a smoker, a very heavy smoker, and he wanted to stop smoking because he spent more time every day smoking. And this is not easy because there's also a chemical addiction that he was experiencing through nicotine. But he spent much of his time smoking or trying to find a way to engage that addiction, because there was a lot wrapped up into that actually did two things. One, it took him away from being with his kids in the now, and also might move away from the value of being there for his kids as he grew older. It's a simple example, but it also demonstrates how hard this can be to live according to our values and what the challenges we might face around it are. That it's not an easy task. It's not as simple as saying, well, I'm just going to turn towards the things that are important to me. It takes time, patience, practice, and creating new habits to engage in our values in a way that's lined up with how important they are to us. So values and meaning become drivers for how we think and operate. Dr. Martin Seligman's is PERMA Model, and there's a book that I'm going to offer if anybody wants to read it by Dr. Seligman around the PERMA Model. It's just a theory of well-being, but what this really goes to is how values and meaning are supported by one, positive emotions. Now I'm going to say this, positive emotions under P and PERMA is not the same as just be happy. It goes back to how we think, how that influences our emotions, and then how those emotions influences our actions and where we can control those. It is more about a locus of control. I say that I'm able to handle challenges as opposed to challenges handle me. That things happen in my life I have no control of, and then I become desperate and kind of throw my hands up saying I have no control, life is out of control, and I feel anxious or scared or that I don't have security. Positive emotions are about when challenges occur, I will tell myself that I'm able to engage with this problem, and I can also engage with my support system around me. From a positive standpoint, say, this is hard, this is challenging. I can even be sad, distressed, but I can still be positive. That sounds strange, but we can absolutely be sad, distressed, and positive that we can engage the circumstance as it's put out before us. That's what positive emotions are about. Engagement, the E. What do we do in our lives that is engaging? Do we feel interested in the tasks that are put before us? Do we move into that flow state? Do we have positive relationships, the R for relationships? Do we line up our experiences with meaning and values in our life? Do we have a sense of accomplishment and achievement? Now, this isn't necessarily the end goal of life will be good when, but it's that I have invested in, let me go back real quick. I've invested in my skill set, and that accomplishment in and of itself is success. So I'm trying to think of things that are really interesting. So I've worked with folks who have phobias too, right? If I've never ridden a bus before, public transportation, that could be hard for me. But then when I do it the first time and I achieve getting from point A to point B, sorry, I'm using a lot of transportation-based metaphors today, but if I achieve getting from point A to point B, then that's an accomplishment, and I can recognize what that feels like to achieve something simple, something, I guess, maybe challenging, but also it doesn't have to be the full end goal of what my life needs to look like. It's a day-to-day basis. Do I accomplish or achieve things that were a challenge? And I also learn skills to overcome those challenges. So again, positive emotion, much more than happiness. Hope, interest, joy, love, compassion, pride, amusement, and gratitude. And I'll pause on gratitude as really a driver towards contentment. If we express more gratitude than frustration, the natural artifact over time is contentment. To be content, we don't have to succeed necessarily by our definition of what success needs to look like. To be content, we can express gratitude. And we find contentment over and over again in the moment because of gratitude. So cultivating a gratitude practice can be really impactful. How do we share gratitudes, kindness, even reflection on what am I grateful for today that can really foster and cultivate my feelings of well-being. I'm happy that I was able to drink clean water today is a form of gratitude. And that creates a sense of security and safety for me that then enables well-being, which can beget happiness. So engagement, right? Am I in my flow? Am I doing something that's meaningful for me? Am I doing something I enjoy? But also there's enough challenge that stimulates me. It's not just routine, but there's also something new and novel about what I'm doing. Not because I feel like I should be, but because it captures my interest. Am I engaged in meaning making or a joint venture, partnering with somebody else or another group or a team to do something that may be bigger than myself? Engagement can lead to meaning and value-driven actions pretty squarely. So positive relationships, again, the quality of my relationships becomes very important here. What are the quality of those relationships I pursue? How do I define quality in the relationships? Do I let my partners, my friends, my parents, my family, my coworkers, my bosses, do I let everybody know who I am in relationships and also what I require, what I need in relationships? Do I feel the capacity to be vulnerable there and express what I need and what's important to me, as well as asking what's important to you, and here's how I can deliver that and share that with you. So the quality of positive relationships. Meaning, as we talked about, intrinsic human quality, the search for meaning, a purpose somewhat greater than ourselves. It is linked to spirituality. It is linked to mission. It is linked to doing something that contributes to the wellness of others. Meaning is important, and it can drive our actions and give us a sense of connection and accomplishments, right? Achievement or mastery, mastering a skill, being successful in something that I didn't know how to do before and I know how to do now is achievements or accomplishments. So this is where we set goals. We set what would I like to do a year from now, 5 years from now? And what are the steps along the way that I can achieve? What are the milestones that I can really look towards in my life that I can define as achievements because they are milestones that move me towards a goal? So how do we organize our thoughts towards achievements, but also recognize the journey in and of itself can really give us a sense of well-being because we're moving towards something. And we can oftentimes be cultivating joy along the way. So tools around this. Let me check the chat real quick. All right. Thank you, WS. For example, how can you practice gratitude in a healthy manner? Okay, question. For example, how can you practice gratitude in a healthy manner without denying how unfortunate circumstances in your life make you feel? So WS, great question. When we practice gratitude, even if we feel bad, it's actually an antidote towards distress or despair. Distress and despair can happen because we don't feel like we're in control of things in our life. And sometimes it's true, we're not. Right now, globally, we know that there was horrendous earthquakes that happened with our neighbors in the world. And there's distress and despair because there's loss. Recognizing loss can work also at the same time as being grateful for the things that aren't lost. We're grateful for folks who do respond to disasters or tragedies. Grateful for, I still have my family with me, and that's okay to say. We can also compare circumstance and find gratitude without diminishing somebody else's experience, because That's still their experience and it's okay. But we can also feel empathy, distress, and find meaning about what can I do to help and contribute. So circumstances may make you feel bad in life, day to day, and we can also hold that feeling of sadness, despair, loss, distress, discomfort, and still find gratitude in something. Because the gratitude in of itself could be as simply as I have the ability to move, or I have the ability to look at the sunset. Gratitude can look all kinds of different ways, and that can really contribute to a sense of well-being in the face of distress or despair. WS, thank you for that question. When we think about purpose, and maybe identifying how we understand what flourishing looks like, living a purpose-driven life, Dr. Seligman wrote the book Flourish. Great read, very interesting take on how to understand happiness and well-being from a purpose-driven choice of action. And actually through the Purpose and PERMA Profiler, there's even an online free assessment you can take for yourself. Purposeplus.com, the survey, it can really give you a current read on how closely are you aligned to living a purpose or meaning-driven life that aligns with your values. It doesn't suppose what your values are or what they should be. That is up to you to define, for you to recognize. But in that, you can absolutely take this. It's a great tool to use. I'll give some other tools as we go on how to identify purpose in your life. The flourishing scale, there's a link here too. The flourishing scale statements. This one's a really interesting assessment you can take at any point for yourself. And this can be used over and over again because it's dynamic. I can do this every day, and then I can decide what do I need to change or focus on. For example, item number 1, I lead a purposeful and meaningful life. Today, I strongly disagree. That gives me an idea that I can work towards agreeing, and it can guide my own progress in how to cultivate happiness, how to cultivate contentment. So this scale is available at that link there. The flourishing scale statements.png. So it's an image there, but also this top link as well. So if we have this PowerPoint available for distribution, by all means, dive back into it and you can link towards these tools. So in the time we have remaining, just a few minutes, we talked about cultivating meaning. We talked about the nature of emotions. I do want to spend a little bit of time just scratching the surface about cultivating, developing emotional language for ourselves. And then offer some tools on how to go about doing that. So cultivating emotional language, a few things. Cultivation it's not static. It doesn't happen just once. We do it time and again because the world and the environment around us changes. So it's a lifelong process of learning, naming our emotions, relearning how our emotions interact with ourselves, the world, and other people. Because relationships and circumstances change, our emotions are adaptive to that. So as we grow and change in our life, so do our emotions and how we experience them. What I felt in relationships when I was 20 looks and feels different than how I experience relationships now in my 40s. And recognizing that change is important for me to understand what are my emotions now and how do they operate in my relationships. So mini emotional check. Again, this is for everybody else to kind of dive into. I'm checking the chat real quick, saw something pop up. Thank you, Sarah. So mini emotional check right now. How are you feeling? Again, this is my therapist, right? My therapist hat that I get to wear. How are you feeling? But when we ask that question, we oftentimes expect an emotional word to come out. I'm feeling happy, sad, I'm okay, tends to be the go-to, right? I'm okay, which okay isn't really a feeling, by the way. But when we ask this, a better way to look at it is how are we feeling? How is my body right now? What is my physical presence? Am I tense? Am I breathing? Am I hunched over? Am I relaxed? How am I actually physically being? And then what are you feeling that's associated to that? This is a great way to do emotion checks. How am I feeling in my physical being? And then what emotion is linked to that? What am I feeling? What's the name of the emotion that's linked to that? And then bonus, how many emotions can you name? You know, we often have just a limited set. We've got anger, happiness, sadness, joy, fear. There's a lot more, right? And they're kind of linked to each other. So emotional language, we can start to really and our connection with other folks. A great tool to get here is the Eichmann's Atlas of Emotions. Here's the link. You can actually go on this website, build your own profile, and you can start learning in a very interactive model. And the interface here is it's really fun to use too, by the way. Learning and diving into emotional language and timelines and all these things about how I'm experiencing emotions and the language I use every day. When we think about emotions, we have to recognize that we're having one. Stay with it. We don't avoid it or deny it. Like I'm feeling fear right now. And I don't want to deny it. And I want to know more about why I'm feeling fear. We name it, it's fear. We notice what's happening for our body, what's happening for our relationships, what's happening for me right now. And then we can choose to act intentionally based on our emotion. So if we think about happy here in purple, I notice that I'm happy. But what I notice is that I'm smiling, I'm laughing. I have the urge to be near people. I'm hugging people. I'm feeling that level of engagement. And then I have a choice, right? Stay in the moment, enjoy myself, express my feelings. So happiness as an emotion can have a noticing aspect tied to it, and then an action also tied to it. And that can relate back to other emotions. That's where we get some control and some depth of language. So just some tips to close this out. Well-being and relationship habits. What do we cultivate? Train your brain, practice being more positive around circumstance. What do you notice every day? What do you intend to pay attention to? What do you intend to do? What relationships do you want to foster and invest in? Express gratitude. Nurture and enjoy your relationships. Live in the moment and savor life's pleasures, and engage in hard tasks and validate your own accomplishments. We can do both. We don't have to be passive. We can enjoy earning happiness. But it doesn't have to be the horizon. It can be in the now. Focus on living with meaning, aligned with your values. Recognize and reassess your values over time, because they will change over time. The values I had when I was 13 about relationships are not necessarily the same values I have now. They may be similar, but the nuances are there, and recognize those nuances. Be okay with changing. And what we practice deep connections, not just a fleeting boost of surface or comparison-based connections, because like we said, we're only validated on how happy we are, and that's the only value we have. Those have low returns, and it's a pretty exhausting cycle. So deep connections with a full range of emotional language. Practice kindness, practice mindfulness, pay attention to the moment. Practice discernment, filter noise. If everything is urgent, which we suffer from right now because we live in a digital information space where everything is important, then it's hard to tell what actually is important to me. So how do I discern information coming to me? And practice care for yourself. All these dimensions of well-being that are critical for us to thrive and flourish. Physical health, financial security, psychological health, relationships, spirituality, meaning. We care for ourselves. That enables us to connect with others. Real quick, a few more apps. The Mood Meter app, well validated. Kind of a nice tool if you want to dive into more emotional-based learning. And then the Mindfulness Coach, the National Center for PTSD under the VA, but this is a really great app, well validated, scientifically based, and it's a nice free app that you can use for mindfulness practices, including a lot of guided meditations. You notice that the leaf is part of that app. So the leaves on the stream show us again how we can observe our thoughts, observe our feelings, and let them pass by. A few more resources here on happiness, the science of happiness, strategies. We just tapped the surface today. So there's a lot out there in the internet base, and there's here too. UNC Chapel Hill, we've got the PEP lab, right? So it's our Center for Positive Emotions and Psychophysiology lab. That's actually a research base here at UNC campus. Amazing stuff. Check out their website. We've got the PAR Center for Ethics, which does happiness investigations on the research base as well. So there's a lot out there. I encourage you to endeavor into your journey of exploring what happiness looks like for you, and how do you cultivate well-being that fosters happiness. Don't chase the happiness. base your life in skills and fostering and cultivating well-being. And everybody, I'll check the chat, but take a good breath. And for today, think of who you will intentionally connect with. Where does your gratitude lie? Who have you not talked to in a while that you can decide you want to say hi and connect and share something important in your life with? Thank you all for your time and attention today. We'll dive into questions and conversation for the remainder of the time. Appreciate you all.
David, thank you so much. Really great session. One of the things that I love best about these is I think it's such a great opportunity to both learn something, so to become educated, and also get some really useful practices, tools, tips, tricks to think about. So this was absolutely that, and I really appreciate it. So folks, the Q&A is open, and we are glad to take questions that you may have. We will include the Q&A code for those of you who are interested at the very end of the session, so hang tight and wait for that. We'll add that up on the screen. So David, maybe while we're waiting for folks to come up with some questions and answers, I know in preparing for this session and thinking about it, one of the things that I come back to is that tip list that you shared. And particularly for our students, but I think for all of us, the COVID pandemic has required us to be distant and remote and isolated from one another. And this piece about relationships is clearly such a critical piece. But one of the things that I've heard from students and even from some colleagues is, I'm out of practice with building relationships, right? The only way that I know to do that anymore is in social media or is, in very particular sort of still isolated kinds of ways. I'm curious to know, based on your sort of work or, skills as a counselor and practitioner, do you have any particular strategies for those of us who may still be, trying to get back in the swing, or who may be more introverted and for whom building those relationships is more challenging, to build and grow better relationships? Are there some baby steps that we can, practice or adopt that might be helpful in that?
Amy, thank you. I love this question too. And you said the answer in your question. The answers oftentimes are, we've moved into a space of disconnection that was forced upon us by a global pandemic. And yet we still persist, we thrive, and we have to do it differently. You said something about saying, I'm not good at this anymore. That's the way in, because likely whoever you're missing that you want to reconnect with or start a new connection with might feel the same. And even if they don't, we still offer to them, I'm out of practice. And we say that, I'm out of practice here, and I still want and desire this connection because I need it. And I want to give this to you as well, but I'm out of practice. That vulnerability opens the door and moves all the pretense aside. We say, okay, how can we do this better together? And let's work together on this, as opposed to, Amy, I need you to show up for me, but there's only a certain way you need to show up for me. If you just say, I'm out of practice, like, great, Amy, how can I help you with this? And so am I. And we get to share that space together. And introversion and extroversion, I love that conversation. It's a whole nother seminar we can get into, because there's ways of being in the world that we have to validate too. But I will always look to our introverts to set the tone. For those of us who are on the line of introvert or extrovert, or those who are very extroverted, the world expects us to be more present in our lives on a day-to-day basis. But introverts who struggle with that because of how energy flows, where I get my energy from, still being connected, but not having to be the one to reach out, is important to recognize. So pay attention to those who aren't reaching out. And if you have the intention to reach out first, don't wait. And it's okay. And then also ask people, how do you like to be reached out to? How do you like to connect? We can absolutely connect over Zoom, digital. I can call you. It's an amazing thing. The phone does work. We can even email, write letters. There's a lot of human ways to connect. Physical presence does mean a lot, but it's not the only way we can connect anymore. So Amy, thank you for that question. I think driving that, though, would be the vulnerability and the willingness to say, I might be out of practice here and I need your help.
Appreciate that so much. There is a question in the Q&A that I love, because it actually relates to something that I was interested in hearing you talk a little bit more about as well. So certainly one of the things that we have heard a lot about, I think over the course of the last couple of years, especially coming out of the pandemic and or all the all of the trauma that we have been feeling, whether or not it's related to the virus or, deaths that we're seeing happen around the country, killings of individuals of color, folks are feeling traumatized. And yet, I think many of us know and understand intuitively, instinctively, some of what you talked about in terms of positivity. And yet, I know, especially from talking to students, some students would say, I'm actually feeling a little bit better today. And so I was talking to somebody and trying to sort of see things on the bright side and be positive, and I got labeled a toxic positive person. And so this attendee has said, my children labeled me as a toxic positive person. Is this a negative? I refuse to apologize for my positive outlook and do acknowledge emotions. How do we find that balance?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think defining it is always in play. And Amy, there's so much that to really recognize in how you phrased the reality of the world that we live in right now. The reality of the world is that the world can be dangerous, and there are things that people do to each other that are abhorrent. There are justice issues that we have to address. The challenge when it comes to positivity is that if we relinquish that positivity and say we can't control this anymore, and people just are this way, or the world is just this way, then we're not driving into that meaning-based change and participating. So positivity actually says, I see the worst in the world, and I positively believe that I can join others in changing it. And when we move to that toxic positivity, I will say this for our participant, that it's likely not toxic unless it's at the avoidance of emotion. If the only thing I can be is positive and happy, if that's all I'm allowed to experience and share with other people, at the detriment of I don't acknowledge the emotions for myself, that's where it can be risky. I won't say toxic, but risky. So it works two ways. One, if you're sharing positive with other people because you intend to do that, and that's your value, and at the same time you recognize a full spectrum of emotions for yourself, that's wonderful and healthy. So the question I would have for anybody who is expressing positivity all the time is that also the only emotion you allow for yourself? If that's the case, then we can talk about how do you expand your emotional language and have a full experience for your own relationship. So that's how I would kind of come at that. If you're able to tell your children, say, you know what, I know my emotions, I recognize them, and I choose how I engage with them and what and how I share with you, that's a healthy stance, as opposed to I can only share positive things. So dive into the conversation too. If you're being accused of being toxically positive, ask more questions. Why do you say that? Tell me about your experience of me. And then here's what I'm experiencing as you're describing this to me. And that gets us into emotional language too. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, really helpful. All right, another question in the Q&A here. Is it okay for people to separate themselves from the troubles and pain of others? At some point, it takes too much energy to care about every injustice under the sun.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Short answer is yes, absolutely. Because when we disconnect, it's not permanent. But if you think about if we only live in that self-sacrificing space, then we exhaust our resources. And our resources aren't necessarily finite if we're only doing one thing. So if we are invested in every injustice and every cause under the sun, without the ability to replenish ourselves from a self-serving and self-caring standpoint, or better yet, a connected standpoint about when I need to lean on others, then we're going to have a very short lifespan of actually diving into those causes. We're going to burn ourselves out too quickly. So the answer is yes. We can disconnect, we can filter and discern what am I capable of diving into today? What do I want to be able to do tomorrow, and what do I need to do to get there? So if I want to do more in a cause tomorrow, then what do I need to do today to shore up those resources, to spend time cultivating joy and happiness in my life because of well-being? Who am I going to reach out to tonight and have a conversation that's not about the cause, but about comedy? Because if I have a conversation about comedy tonight, then I'm more equipped for the cause tomorrow. We can't live and breathe justice only. We have to balance it with replenishing our resources. So, complicated answer, but the answer is yes, we can disconnect.
That's great. I want to connect maybe another couple of streams with something that we know, something that you mentioned again on your tip list, and something we know from research here on our campus and really beyond. So again, I clicked on your building empathetic capacity for others. And one of the things that we know increasingly, and this is not a Carolina problem, this is a broad-based problem, is that people tend to align themselves with other folks who think very much like them, share common characteristics, all of this. And that we tend to lose empathy for those who are different than we are. And we've had an opportunity to engage in a conversation as that relates to very specific activity on our campus, in that recently there has been some research, particularly about students making the determination to self-censor views that they have or perspectives, ideas, because they are afraid that they may not be accepted by their peers. I'm curious to know, do you have recommendations regarding how we can potentially break this chain? Are there practices, are there techniques that we can develop to build empathy, to be able to communicate across difference and really understand and appreciate and empathize with others?
Amy, this is again an amazing question, an amazing space of conversations. In this space, it's so important for us to actually practice discernment. And if we're only seeking, I'm going to actually back this up. When it comes to value-based alignment, we tend to have values and we tend to seek folks who are aligned in our values. That's okay. At the same time, we also have to be good critical judges of our information processing. Do we discern what information we're getting? And do we ask the question, how do I know this is true, accurate, or correct? And the way to do it is I find a counterpoint or a counter argument that I can then apply to my own values, right? So what's the counterpoint? What parts of that counter argument to my position actually align with my values too? What we tend to find from an empathetic standpoint is that two opposing viewpoints tend to have a whole lot of the same connection points from a values-based standpoint. So if we think of extremes, right? So if we say the extremes of, I like chocolate and I'm in the vanilla camp or the strawberry camp from ice cream. These are extremes. And these camps say chocolate and vanilla or strawberry and vanilla ice cream shall never, like strawberry is only better, vanilla is horrible. We can't, they just can't mix, right? We can't do them at the same time, or I'm always going to think this is better. And yet, what's the value in this? That ice cream is good. That ice cream can join us together. I like vanilla, I like strawberry, and yet we both can agree that we like ice cream. Super simple metaphor for this, but that's how it works, that usually extraordinarily opposite views have a lot more value-based aspects in common that build our common ground than we choose to recognize, because we're digging our heels into our camps or our sides or our tribes, as it were, and reinforcing that echo chamber. And what we can do is say, well, you have a different viewpoint than me. I'm not going to lose my viewpoint just by talking with you. And actually, I can understand your values. I can share mine. And that's where we start to identify the values-based language and find common ground. And that's where change can actually happen. And we reduce tension, we reduce fear, we reduce adversity and danger. And there's a lot of polarization happening, not just in the last few years, but in the last several decades. We've uncovered a lot of what was happening. We're having amazing, courageous conversations about it. And we're also experiencing backlash around it, which is natural because backlash comes from a fear of change kind of standpoint, or the unwillingness to recognize shared values. So to your question, Amy, that's the important part, is we can have different positions and yet the values might line up.
It's really helpful. Another couple of questions in the chat here. One says, I think that was a great question about disconnection, but could the speaker comment on suggestions for people who are from marginalized or vulnerable groups who may find it more difficult to separate from certain social causes, etc.?
Yep, 100%, because it is lived experience. So we are still subject to our experience in the world and our circumstance. And when we think about marginalized, how do we center margins, for one, is really an important conversation. How do we talk about those who are impacted by an injustice the most? And we tend to ignore their voice the most. And if you can't disconnect from it because of circumstances, one put upon you by the world around you and by identity, how I perceive myself and how the world also perceives me, those things we can't escape from. we can acknowledge them. Say, okay, the world sees me this way. I see myself this way. I recognize where the injustices are. I also recognize where real risk is in taking action in this space. From a positive standpoint, from a meaning-making standpoint, from a cultivation of contentment standpoint, that's challenging. And I will say this too, Amy, that finding contentment in light of injustice or oppression is hard to do. And it takes more practice than those who might have the privilege not to be oppressed. And because it takes more practice, then it's incumbent on all of us to share that load together. But there's no requirement to be content if injustice and oppression is happening to you. And I'll say that too. But we can also find gratitude and positivity about how do I choose to engage the fight or the struggle? Where do I need help and support? Who can I trust and where do I find safety? Those are things that are positive actions. I can ask myself those questions and I can identify folks who are with me in this cause, who are safe and who I can trust, and who can also forward the conversation with other power structures around me. It's not a simple answer, and it's very true that contentment is not always available, but we can find gratitude and positivity towards action.
Really helpful notes. And I think although the question was focused on marginalized and vulnerable groups, something for all of us to do there, particularly connecting back to that previous question, perhaps about empathy. That's helpful. All right. Another question. How can I stop myself from feeling guilty or selfish for leading the life that I want and living according to my own values and beliefs rather than living according to others' values and beliefs, or playing a role for others that I do not have the desire or capacity to?
Again, therapist hat really quickly. This is a great question for boundary setting. Boundary setting is important. We set boundaries in our lives, and feeling guilty or selfish for leading the life you want to live, I'm going to bracket this too. If it is free from oppressing someone else or harming someone else, then it's a boundary issue. So the question is, why do I feel selfish, or who is making me or intending for me to feel selfish? So what messages am I getting from other people about I should feel selfish? So if I'm living the life that I want to live, what are the things that I'm aligned with? What values am I following in my life? How am I fostering and cultivating happiness for me? And if that's working well, and other people or other entities, systems, messages around me are saying, you should not feel this good, you should feel bad for this, that's where I draw the boundary and say, no, I work hard for this. Living the life I want to live doesn't mean I can't also recognize other people's challenges. And I think this is where we get stuck oftentimes, is that we can only live a good life and therefore kind of disconnect with other people's suffering. And that's not true. We can hold two things to be true at the same time. I have a good life that's secure, and I can acknowledge where somebody else may not be at the same place I am. And I can choose to engage in that conversation and support them. To be made guilty or feeling guilty or selfish, I would always ask, where is that message coming from? Is it coming from me? Is it coming from perception around me? Or is it very explicitly being put upon me? So that's the therapist answer. Where's the message coming from? But if you draw a boundary around also not wanting to participate in other people's lives, the role they expect you to, that's perfectly okay. I can't do this. I choose not to do this for my own well-being, for cultivating my own happiness, because participating in your life in the way that you expect me to does not work for me or doesn't align with my values. So we have to ask ourselves those questions. What is the ask? And what is my capacity to meet that ask too? So yeah, there's some session stuff for everybody today. We can dive in more, but it's a good question. That's a complicated one.
And perhaps a good one to end on. We have reached the end of our time. David, thank you again so much. And thanks everybody for participating. And as always, some really great questions at the end that I hope gave folks some useful things that they can take back into their lives beyond this conversation and adapt and adopt as is appropriate. So Drum roll, please. I know the long-awaited QR code. Can we put that up on the screen so that folks can have it? And please note that we do have, as you can see, some updated mental health seminars for the remainder of the term. Keep an eye out for those. If you forget where these are, we always encourage you, as we do in every one of these sessions, to use the Heals Care Network, care.unc.edu, as your go-to site for an array of resources for connecting to student peer chat. If you need to, just a wealth of information and resources that we can connect you to very directly, and information about upcoming events in the drop-down menu on the left side. So thank you everyone for your wonderful participation today. There's the QR code, everybody. If you miss that or lose it for whatever reason, please feel free to get in touch with us. David, all of those applause are going directly to you. Thanks so much, and applause back to everyone else. This is absolutely a team sport, and it requires everyone's participation and engagement. So thanks so much for contributing to our Carolina culture of compassion and care. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take good care, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.